A staple of American culture. One of the best when it comes to marketing to the American market. Everything about this franchise, everything about this organization just screams cultural relevance, or at least it used to. I could be talking about either NASCAR or Star Wars, depending on what you want to look at it. And before we go any further, I do want to say, I know I made a video like this before, and I covered a lot of the same topics, but I will say I didn't like how that one turned out over time, and I wanted to redo it. So we're going to have a little bit of a George Lucasism here, and we're going to have an edit to the originals. With this, I also will be bringing on a friend of mine and DannyBTalks to talk about this as well. And, well, without further ado, I just want to get right into it. This is about every Star Wars car that was in NASCAR. So this will all be coinciding for the most part with, one, the fact that it is Star Wars Day, may the 4th be with you, and two, these cars will coincide with what was going on at the time when it comes to the Star Wars franchise. Starting off in 1999. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is arguably one of the most divisive films of all time. But at the time of its release, Episode 1 marketing was everywhere. According to everyone I know that was alive back then, seeing how I was only 2 or so around this time, you couldn't go into a supermarket, any kind of store, watch TV, do anything without seeing The Phantom Menace. And for good reason. This was the biggest movie event of the past 45 years when you look back from 2022. Basically, it was the biggest cultural deal a movie had since Star Wars in 1977, and I could even argue it had more cultural relevance than any other movie that has really come out since 1999, even the last few Avengers movies. With this, of course, George Lucas and everyone involved with Star Wars wanted to push the branding everywhere. And something you need to know about George Lucas is that he is really, really into racing. Actually, before he got into a bad car accident at the age of 16, he wanted to be a race car driver before going into film. And since then has raced in the Toyota celebrity races that they used to put on back in the day in the early 2000s. And with all of this in mind, it makes complete sense that George Lucas would want to branch out to NASCAR. At the time, the fastest growing sport in America and one of his favorite pastimes in racing. So they reached out, and Jeff Gordon and Hendrick Motorsports put together a deal to put the Phantom Menace on his Pepsi car for the NASCAR Busch Series at Charlotte for the 1999 CarQuest Auto Parts 300. This car had characters like Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson, Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Ewan McGregor, Jar Jar Binks, as well as the new Darth Maul. In the race itself, Jeff Gordon started 5th, and it looked like he's going to have a pretty good day overall. He ran top 5 for the first half of the race, going up against guys like Dave Blaney, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Matt Kenseth. Basically, he raced the 2000 NASCAR Winston Cup rookie class before they were the NASCAR rookie class of 2000. And he was able to get to 2nd, right up behind the dominant Mark Martin. Unfortunately, that's where it all goes off. Gordon had to drop out of the race due to his rear end having issues, and because of the mechanical failure, there was no way to get the car back out there. So, because of this, Gordon would fall out of the race, finishing 33rd, leading no laps and not competing for a win that he very easily could have gotten. After The Phantom Menace kind of flopped, many were looking forward to the second Star Wars prequel, as Attack of the Clones would have been a gauge to see whether Phantom Menace was a one-off or if it was the new trend. And while many were disappointed by the movie itself, the cultural fever pitch that it had was everywhere, again, still, and especially for marketing. So they took it up a step this time. Instead of being in the NASCAR Busch Series, they would go up to the NASCAR Winston Cup Series with John Andretti and the famous Petty 43. Starting 28th, this car actually ran really well for how it had been running that season. You see, the early 2000s started the real trend of the Petty 43 car running pretty poorly, and that year it was looking pretty bad, especially at the mile-and-a-half tracks. But Early on, the 43 car had actually made his way up from that 28th starting spot up into the top 10. He ran into the top 10 well before lap 100 and for most of the first half to 3/4 of the race. What ultimately did them in was the fact that they were not able to adjust to the changing track, as with the Coca-Cola 600, especially at that time, much of the first half of the race was in the light, then the next 100 laps were sort of in the sunset and with the sun going down, and then complete darkness overtook the track at the last 100 laps of the race. Without them being able to change, the handling went away from the 43 car, and unfortunately, he would drift back to be a lap down in 15th position. The car itself was actually a very odd one, and many would say ugly. But it had plenty of Star Wars characters, like Jango Fett and the aforementioned Obi-Wan. On the driver's side, you had Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, and Mace Windu. On the passenger side, you had Count Dooku and Zam Wesell. And then on the back of the car, you had clones. And interestingly enough, there was one in the light, one in the dark. A little foreshadowing, I would say. At the same time, Cheerios ran a special promotion with 3 small 1/64 die casts in Cheerios boxes for kids to get. One of them was split in half and had Luke Skywalker on one side and Darth Vader. Another one had Darth Maul on one side and Qui-Gon Jinn. And then the real die cast was the third one in there, the one with Jango Fett and Obi-Wan on both sides. These are pretty hard to find nowadays, but at the time, they were in pretty much every Cheerios box. Then, of course, comes Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Episode 3 was, at the time, the end of the Star Wars franchise, and the motorsports-friendly George Lucas decided to go all out with it. Everything about Revenge of the Sith was taking everything up to 11. It wasn't about playing it safe. It wasn't about making people's expectations get met. It was about just going as grand as possible. The movie itself actually now is viewed in very favorable light, even compared to the original trilogy, and, well, the marketing was still top-notch because you had someone as creative as George Lucas and his team. So they went all out with 3 different races and 4 different cars in the span of the last half of April and start of May. Starting off, you had the race at the Phoenix International Raceway, where both of the Robert Yates racing cars would don special Revenge of the Sith colors. Elliott Sadler had it for dark chocolate, whereas Dale Jarrett had it for M&Ms in general. The race itself also was heavily sponsored by the Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith video game, and a special trailer actually debuted during that race. And during the race as well, there were special promotions so that fans and kids could win a copy of the game itself. Now, as for the race itself, neither car did very well. When you had the 38 car starting 33rd and the 88 starting 35th, you knew it might be a tough trek up. And actually, if you go back and rewatch this race, neither Yates car even gets screen time until about the second half of the race itself. You can go back and watch. I believe it's lap 149 is the first time they get on screen in race conditions. Both of them were lapped early on, with only Sadler managing to get back on the lead lap and use a little strategy at the end of the race and managed to get a good finish with an 11th. Meanwhile, Dale Jarrett finished a lap down in 23rd. The 38 car had M&Ms dressed as, well, one of them is a stormtrooper and the other is Boba Fett. Meanwhile, the 88 car had M&Ms dressed as Princess Leia and C-3PO. Now, for the next one, Jeff Gordon's car at Talladega in 2005, I passed to my friend, DannyBTalks.
In 2005, Lucasfilms found itself at the climax of the original prequel trilogy series of Star Wars, leading up to Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And with this partnership came a few different sponsorships of cars in NASCAR in 2005, but one of the more iconic ones was the one that Jeff Gordon drove at Talladega Superspeedway in 2005. Featuring Yoda on the front of his hood in association with Pepsi, the original Pepsi paint scheme itself really built in good to the Star Wars theme. It kind of looked as if you were going into hyperdrive in a Millennium Falcon, so to speak. But with Yoda on the hood and Jeff Gordon behind the wheel, that car was set to go on and put on a good run at Talladega Superspeedway. And before the race, the fun continued. Jeff Gordon was even seen posing for a picture with Darth Vader, 2 stormtroopers, and Jango Fett for some reason was there, because Jango Fett was not in the 3rd movie. But regardless, this will always go down as one of the more iconic cars in Star Wars NASCAR history.
Gordon wasn't the only Hendrick driver that got to get in on the Revenge of the Sith fun. Kyle Busch in his rookie year actually managed to get a special scheme as well. And it was at a good track too, at his first start that year at Richmond, where he started 10th and finished 4th. Kyle's first start was in a race that Kasey Kahne absolutely dominated. Kahne ran at a blistering fast pace that only Tony Stewart could actually keep up with on a competitive level. So, Kyle Busch, being one of the few drivers to stay on the lead lap, was actually incredibly impressive. While not leading at all, he was easily a top 3 to 5 car all night and really never left the top 10. This was the car that actually was run on the opening weekend of the movie itself. On the hood, there was Darth Vader. On the driver's side, Mace Windu with a clone behind him with his gun raised. On the passenger side, there was Yoda and Chewbacca, and then on the deck lid, there was C-3PO and R2-D2. And on the back, looking like they were dueling, was Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. This would mark the end of marketing in NASCAR during the George Lucas era of NASCAR. The only other bit of marketing there was a 05 Darth Vader car that was sold on NASCAR's Authentics line with different die-cast providers. And it marked a dark time for both NASCAR and Star Wars, where much of the franchise and sports themselves went dormant on the popular scale. But in 2015, a lot of this changed, as Disney now had acquired Star Wars rights and NASCAR had a new TV deal. And in 2015, at the end of the season with Eric Jones, there would be the final hurrah for Star Wars and NASCAR, with the Star Wars Battlefront car that was part of GameStop's run. While not received well, Battlefront was pushed heavily by GameStop. And at this rate, you can see the differences between something that GameStop and George Lucas would do, as this car was pretty bare bones with the cover of an AT-AT and a Rebel fighter on the hood and the logo on the deck lid with a couple of sort of terrain looking things on the side, but it was nothing very special. Jones would start 7th in this race, and while finishing 3rd, it was actually largely overshadowed. See, this was part of Jones's part-time season in 2015, and at the time, he was a phenom in the lower series in the mid-2010s before making a jump up to the Cup Series. Though top 5 all day, he was overshadowed by Kyle Larson dominating the day, as well as a championship battle between Chris Buescher, Chase Elliott, Ty Dillon, and Regan Smith. And with that, that's it. Those are all of the Star Wars cars, real and not real, that NASCAR has had. Now I want to pass this one on to you. What was your favorite of these cars, and would you like to see a new Star Wars car in NASCAR at any point? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you to all my channel members for your continued support. And be sure to watch the NASCAR Weekly podcast tonight on my channel, as we'll be having an executive from Goodyear on. So until then, have a good one.